The sirens echoed across the lake just as I was untying the cover on my boat. I glanced up, annoyed but not surprised. That sound had become way too familiar ever since I moved into Maple Shore Estates last spring. The moment I saw the flashing lights bounce off the water, I already knew who was behind this stunt. "Step away from the boat, sir." One of the officers shouted from the edge of the dock. I raised both hands in the air and sighed. "Let me guess," I said. "Someone named Francine called about a suspicious vessel?" The officer blinked in confusion. "How'd you know that?" "Because Francine Decker, the self-appointed tyrant of our HOA, had made it her life's mission to make mine miserable." She was in her 50s, bleach blonde bob, constantly clutching a clipboard like it was a weapon. If there was a speck of dust on your trash bin lid, Francine was already dialing the HOA hotline, or more often, the actual police. This time, she'd gone full nuclear. I turned to see her standing smugly at the top of the hill, arms crossed, pastel scarf flapping in the breeze like she was the queen of suburbia. "That boat is not allowed here, Mr. Nathaniel Lawson," she called out. "You are in violation of HOA Code 16.3, unauthorized watercraft storage and usage." "I'm not storing it," I replied. "I'm using it at the lake, which I own part of." Francine scoffed and turned to the officers as they approached me. "He parked that eyesore here since yesterday." I warned him, "We have strict rules. He's trespassing on HOA-controlled property." The younger cop rubbed his temple. "Sir, do you have any documentation for this boat, or this dock?" I reached into my backpack slowly and pulled out a laminated map and a legal packet. "Actually, I do. This is the original property deed from when I bought my house. See that?" I pointed to a highlighted section. "Lot 12 includes partial lake rights, dock access, boat rights, everything." It was grandfathered in before the HOA even existed. Francine's eyes narrowed like she just swallowed a lemon. "That's not valid. That map is old." The older officer took the papers from me and studied them. "This is stamped by the county assessor and notarized." "Looks legit." Francine stepped forward, flustered. No, this can't be right. I spoke with the HOA attorney. We control the shoreline now." I turned to her. "Funny thing about that, Francine, you can't control what you never owned." The HOA tried to pass a motion to adopt the lakefront last year, but it failed. I was at the meeting. You were too busy yelling at a teenager for skateboarding. The younger cop looked between us. "Ma'am, unless you can prove otherwise, there's no crime here." Francine's jaw clenched. "He needs to remove that boat. It's an eyesore," I smiled. "Tell it to a judge." Apparently, that was exactly what she intended to do. A week later, I got a notice taped to my door, official HOA citation, demanding I remove the unauthorized marine equipment from the lake or face escalating daily fines. The letterhead had Francine's signature in bold. I didn't even need to read the rest to know what I had to do. So I filed a court date. If Francine wanted a battle over who owned the lake access, she was about to get one. And I had the paperwork, receipts, and a perfectly functioning boat trailer ready to roll into that courtroom. Let's just say Francine wasn't going to paddle her way out of this one. The courtroom smelled faintly of pine cleaner and stale coffee. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a cold glare on the polished tile floor. I sat at the table marked Respondent, flipping through my binder of documents while the plaintiff's side remained conspicuously empty. Francine was late. Judge Morales, a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s with a reputation for having zero tolerance for nonsense, glanced at the clock before addressing the bailiff. "If the complainant doesn't arrive in the next 5 minutes, I'll proceed without them." I didn't look up. I didn't need to. I could already hear the frantic clicking of chunky heels echoing through the hallway. Sure enough, the door burst open and Francine stumbled in, out of breath, dragging a wheeled briefcase behind her. She wore a salmon-colored pantsuit and a look of forced authority. Her face flushed when she saw me already seated and calm. "Apologies, Your Honor," she said, straightening her scarf. "I had to make last-minute copies." Judge Morales raised an eyebrow. "You had a month to prepare." Please take your seat. Francine huffed and sat down, unloading a stack of paper onto the table like it gave her credibility. I caught a glimpse. Most of it looked like printed emails and screenshots. No county seals, no legal headers, just noise. The judge adjusted her glasses. Now then, this is case number 729B. The Homeowners Association of Maple Shore Estates versus Mr. Nathaniel Lawson. The HOA alleges that Mr. Lawson has violated subdivision regulations by mooring a personal watercraft in a restricted area. Mr. Lawson, you're contesting the validity of the HOA's claim. I looked up. Yes, Your Honor. I contend that the HOA has no authority over the lake access in question. I have the original deed and a certified property easement. Judge Morales nodded. Let's begin, Miss Decker. Since your association initiated the complaint, present your evidence. Francine stood, cleared her throat, and launched into her routine. Your Honor, this community has standards. We have bylaws, voted on and ratified by residents, that prohibit certain types of watercraft and shoreline usage. Mr. Lawson has blatantly ignored these rules. The judge stopped her with a hand. Please stick to specifics. What legal authority does the HOA have over the shoreline in question? Francine lifted one of her printed emails. This is a correspondence from our HOA attorney. It confirms that we intend to enforce jurisdiction over all shared community features, including the shoreline. Intend to enforce is not the same as possessing legal control, the judge said, unimpressed. Do you have any land surveys or title documents proving the HOA owns or manages that portion of the lake? Francine hesitated. Not with me, no. But do you have any recorded amendments to the CCRs that show the HOA has acquired riparian rights? No, but then I'm not interested in intentions or assumptions. Mr. Lawson, I stood and handed the clerk my binder. This includes my home's original title deed from the county, dated before the HOA's formation. It also includes a survey map filed with the county recorder's office indicating my parcel includes a 20-foot right-of-way to the lake, with dock and mooring rights. Page 4 includes the easement documentation. The judge flipped through it, her brow furrowed but not in skepticism in focus. Everything here appears in order. Miss Decker, did your association attempt to alter or annex this easement legally? Francine crossed her arms. We don't need to. It's part of the community. The judge leaned forward. But the law says otherwise unless you have documentation of purchase or a successful court action, neither of which you've shown me. Francine's voice cracked. He's making the neighborhood look low-end. That boat is, this is a court of law, not a decor committee, the judge snapped. You cannot override private property rights because you dislike someone's taste. Francine sat down, her expression stiff. I could see her jaw tightening as the judge continued reviewing my documents. Then something odd happened. The judge paused on a page near the back of the binder. She narrowed her eyes and looked up. Mr. Lawson, this notarized letter, where did you obtain it? That's from the previous owner. He left it with the realtor when I closed on the house. It explains the history of the easement and confirms that he and his family used that dock for over 20 years without interference. Judge Morales looked at Francine. Are you aware your HOA attempted to bill this man for shoreline maintenance fees for a property it didn't own? Francine blinked. We have the right to levy fees for community upkeep. Not on land you don't own. Sending financial demands for unowned property is a serious matter. Did your HOA collect any payments? Francine hesitated. Only a few, voluntary contributions mostly. Did you label them as mandatory dues? After a long pause, Francine finally said they received invoices. The judge leaned back in her chair. So you issued what appeared to be legal bills for a portion of land your organization has no documented claim to. That could be construed as misrepresentation, possibly even fraud. Francine's face drained of color. Judge Morales turned to the bailiff. Please make a copy of this page for the county prosecutor's office. That was the moment I realized Francine hadn't just overstepped, she might have stepped into something criminal. After a 10-minute recess, the judge returned with two rulings. First, the HOA's claim against Mr. Lawson is dismissed with prejudice. Second, I am referring the matter of unauthorized financial demands and potential misrepresentation of ownership to the district attorney's office for review. This court does not take lightly the abuse of authority, especially when it directly affects private property rights. Francine didn't speak. She just stared ahead, like if she didn't move, none of it would be real. Outside the courthouse, my neighbor Glenn, a retired firefighter who lived 2 houses down, was waiting on the steps. "I heard they tried to drag you in over the boat thing," he said, handing me a folded piece of paper. "Found this in my mailbox last week. Figured you'd want to see it." It was another fake invoice, identical to the one the previous owner had kept. This one sent to Glenn. He never paid it, just tossed it in a drawer. But now it was a pattern. We weren't looking at just petty overreach anymore. We were looking at possible financial abuse. Later that week, I met with 5 other homeowners in my garage. Each of them had a story: unexpected fines, threats of lien filings, citations for violations that weren't in the CCRs. One woman, Sandra, had been fined $300 for planting tulips in non-regulation colors. Tulips. I brought out a whiteboard and started mapping it all out. There was a paper trail. And now that a judge had ruled against them, we had momentum. No one wanted to live under Francine's thumb anymore. We weren't just going to expose her. We were going to take her down by the rules she claimed to love so much. And this time, the whole neighborhood would be watching. Glenn's garage door rattled open at precisely 7 on Thursday evening. Inside, the folding table we'd dragged in from his patio was covered in manila folders and half-drained mugs of black coffee. The air smelled faintly like motor oil and lemon cleaner, and the single overhead bulb gave everything that gritty, underdog war room glow. I glanced around. Glenn, Sandra, and 3 others had shown up right on time. Each of them carried a folder of their own, just like I'd asked. "Let's start with this," I said, spreading out a stack of invoices Francine had issued over the last year. "Check the dates. And cross-reference them with property maps we pulled from the county." Sandra adjusted her reading glasses and leaned over the table. "She was sending these to people who don't even border the lake. She figured they wouldn't question it," I said. "Most folks don't know what their deeds actually say. They see an official-looking letter and assume they owe something." Glenn flipped one of the invoices over. "Look at this, there's no return address, just a P.O. box downtown. And the payment portal leads to a private merchant account," I added. "Not a registered HOA account. That's where things get interesting." A younger guy named Eric, who worked in IT for the county library, pulled his laptop from his backpack. "I traced the payment gateway. It's not tied to the HOA's tax ID, it's registered to a shell company. Decker Community Services LLC. Sandra's hand flew to her mouth. "She created a company in her own name 2 years ago," Eric said, turning the screen toward us. "Filed it with the state under Community Maintenance Consulting, no mention of Maple Shore Estates. No mention of any board members, just her and a business address that matches a UPS store on Route 40. Everyone stared at the screen in silence. "She's been laundering fake HOA fees through a private account," I said. "That's not just unethical. That's felony-level wire fraud." Glenn exhaled slowly. "How many people do you think paid into this? Maybe a dozen, maybe 50. Depends on how long she's been hiding it." Eric scrolled through spreadsheets he'd compiled from neighbors who volunteered to share their bank statements. "So far, I've confirmed at least 38 payments over the last 18 months. They total just under $24,000. Sandra's voice dropped. "We need to tell someone." "I already did," I said. "I met with a detective from the white-collar crimes unit this morning. I gave them everything. The invoices, the deeds, the shell company records, everything we've collected so far." Glenn raised an eyebrow. "And they were very interested," I said. They're running a formal investigation now, told me not to contact Francine again directly. Eric shut his laptop. Too late, she's already starting to panic. I looked at him. How do you know? She sent out a mass email about an emergency HOA meeting this Saturday, claimed it's to address misinformation being circulated around the neighborhood. Sandra snorted. Misinformation. That's rich. She's trying to get out ahead of it, I said. Control the narrative. Glenn crossed his arms. Then we beat her to it. We spent the next hour building a packet for every household in the neighborhood. Not just a summary of the fraud, but copies of the payment records, a list of the shell company's state filings, and a signed letter from the detective confirming an active investigation into HOA financial misconduct. By the time we finished, the garage smelled like toner and the table was buried under stacks of manila envelopes. The next morning, we walked door to door. No speeches, no drama. Just a quiet knock, a polite handoff, and a simple, "Please give this a read when you have a moment." By sunset, the entire community had been briefed. Saturday's meeting was standing room only. The clubhouse had never been so full. People lined the back wall, whispering and clutching their packets. Several had highlighted sections. A few had added sticky notes. The atmosphere was tense but energized, like everyone had just realized they'd been playing against a rigged dealer. Francine stood at the front, flanked by two board members who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. She wore a blazer that might have intimidated someone last year, but now just looked desperate. Her usual clipboard was gone. Instead, she clutched a single sheet of paper like a lifeline. "I want to thank everyone for coming," she began, her voice tight. "There has been a lot of confusion lately. Some individuals have circulated false claims about the HOA's financial practices. I'm here to clarify. What about the money?" Someone called from the back. Francine blinked. "Excuse me." "The $24,000 in fake invoices," Sandra said, stepping forward. "You funneled it through a company you own. That's not confusion. That's theft." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Francine's eyes darted toward the exit. "It's not theft if the fees were used for community upkeep," she said quickly. "We have landscaping costs, security lighting, dock maintenance, none of which is documented in the HOA's official expense reports," Eric said, "because that money never went through the HOA accounts. It went into your LLC." Francine's voice rose an octave. "That company was created to streamline community services. It's perfectly legal." "Not when you're billing residents under the guise of HOA dues," I said, stepping forward. "You used your position to create the illusion of authority." "That's fraud, Francine, and the police agree." Murmurs turned into open voices of anger. Several people held up their envelopes. One man shouted, "I paid $600 last year. Where's that money now?" Francine's hands trembled. "You people don't understand how hard it is to manage a community." The double doors burst open. Two detectives entered, flashing badges. The room fell dead silent. "Francine Decker?" one asked, striding toward the front. She froze. "You're under investigation for multiple counts of financial fraud and misappropriation of community funds. We have a warrant to search your home and business records." Francine's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The other detective pulled a small folder from his jacket. "You'll need to come with us, ma'am." The board members stepped aside as Francine was quietly escorted out. No one clapped. No one cheered. The silence was louder than any celebration. After they left, Judge Morales arrived. She stepped up to the front without ceremony and addressed the room. "I've been appointed temporary overseer of Maple Shore Estates until a new board can be formed," she said. "There will be a formal audit of all HOA finances effective immediately. Any residents charged improper fees will be reimbursed. And as of now, all enforcement actions are suspended pending review." The room exhaled in unison. That night the lake was quiet, no sirens, no clipboards, just the sound of water lapping against my dock as I stood at the shoreline. Glenn walked up, holding 2 bottles of root beer. "Think we'll get someone decent in charge next?" he asked. "We will," I said, Because this time we're paying attention." He nodded and handed me a bottle. "You ever think she'd go down that hard?" I looked out over the water. "She built a kingdom on fake rules and made up fees. Eventually, it was gonna collapse. We just gave it a push." Behind us, porch lights flicked on across the neighborhood. Conversations drifted through the air. Neighbors who once kept their heads down now talking openly, comparing notes, planning. The tyranny of Francine was over. And this time, the community wasn't just watching. It was awake. I was halfway through sanding the front deck rail when a white sedan rolled up slowly along the curb. It wasn't unmarked or threatening, but it wasn't one of the usual neighborhood cars either. The driver's side window lowered and a man in a navy sport coat leaned out. "Mr. Lawson?" I set down the sander and wiped my hands on my jeans. "That's me," he stepped out. "Detective Rail, I'm with the county's Financial Crimes Division." I nodded. "You're the one who took over from Detective Owens." "That's right." He glanced around the quiet street. "You have a moment. There's something you should see." Inside, we sat at the dining table. He opened a leather folder and pulled out 2 photographs, sliding them across to me. Both showed the same building. A squat, 2-story structure tucked behind a strip mall with a faded sign that read Decker Community Services. "Looks abandoned," I said. "It is now," he said. "We executed a search warrant last week. Found shredded documents, 3 laptops, and a locked filing cabinet containing HOA member data including bank routing numbers and authorization forms." I looked up. "Authorization for what?" "Direct withdrawals," he said. "Some residents unknowingly signed auto-pay agreements thinking they were for utilities or regular dues. Those forms were routed through a private payment processor registered under Francine's business. We've confirmed 72 unauthorized debit transactions." My stomach turned. How many people knew? Just her. And one accomplice, her nephew, Michael. He was listed as the community financial liaison on several internal documents. No one else on the HOA board had access to the accounts. I leaned back in my chair. "What happens now?" "They've both been indicted," he said. "Wire fraud, identity theft, and operating a fraudulent billing scheme. The DA's office is also pursuing charges for falsifying financial statements and obstruction." I stared at the photos. "What about restitution?" He nodded. "That's coming. The judge already approved a freeze on both of their assets. Once the audit is complete, the victims will be reimbursed from the seized funds." I exhaled. "That's something." He packed up the folder and rose. "You did the right thing bringing this forward. Most people would have just paid the fines and moved on." As I walked him out, he paused at the door. "By the way," he said, "you might want to check with the county clerk's office. Turns out, Francine filed paperwork to amend the HOA's charter about 6 months ago. Quietly tried to convert it into a private management trust." My eyebrows lifted. "Why would she do that?" "To remove oversight," he said. "A trust doesn't require member voting for most decisions. She was preparing to lock down the entire neighborhood under her control." I didn't answer. I didn't have to. He could see it in my face. The next morning, I drove down to the county building and requested the amendment documents. The clerk handed over a thin folder, just 3 stapled pages and a handwritten signature list. But there was one problem. Half the signatures belonged to people who'd moved out years ago. Forgery. I faxed copies to the DA's office and then called Glenn. By sunset, we had a meeting set with Judge Morales and the Interim Oversight Committee. Inside the community clubhouse, the new board sat at a long folding table, clearly still adjusting to running things without a dictator breathing down their necks. Judge Morales joined via a speakerphone at the center of the table. I laid the papers down. These were filed 6 months ago. If they'd passed, Francine would have had full control over all future HOA decisions, budgets, enforcement, even property assessments. One of the new board members, a retired school principal named Denise, adjusted her glasses. "These signature lines, some of these people don't even live here anymore." "Correct," I said. "The amendment was never valid. She falsified consent to rewrite our governing documents. The judge's voice echoed from the speaker. That's enough to void the amendment entirely. I'll notify the county clerk and have it removed from the record. Denise looked around the room. We need to do more than that. We need transparency, open financials, recorded meetings, public access to all board documents. The rest of the room murmured in agreement. I raised a hand. We also need a clause that prevents any future board member from forming private companies tied to HOA operations. Denise nodded. Agreed, full prohibition on conflicts of interest. It was time to clean house, and everyone knew it. Over the next few weeks, the neighborhood transformed. The old HOA website, once a barren page with a single contact form, was replaced with a fully transparent portal showing budgets, board minutes, and an anonymous complaint system. Residents began volunteering for committees, landscaping, safety, event planning, things they'd never had a voice in before. Sandra took over the garden club, and within days, the entrance to our street bloomed with a mix of native wildflowers and low-maintenance shrubs. Eric helped install a secure neighborhood Wi-Fi hub near the lake, and Glenn, with his background in emergency response, organized a community safety day complete with CPR training and fire extinguisher demos. Then came the restitution. The county sent out checks, funds recovered from the frozen accounts. Some were only a few $100s. Others were in the thousands. The note attached to each one was brief. Due to financial misconduct by former HOA officers, you are entitled to reimbursement. No apologies, no explanations. Just the truth, delivered in a plain envelope. The day my own check arrived, I didn't cash it right away. I walked it down to the dock, stood on the weathered planks, and looked out over the lake. The wind stirred the water just enough to ripple the surface, and in the distance, I saw a few kids skipping stones near the far bank. Francine had tried to claim all this, turn it into her personal fiefdom, but the lake wasn't hers, and it never would be. By midsummer, word of what happened at Maple Shore Estates spread to nearby communities. I got a letter from a homeowner in Ridgewood Pines asking how we'd exposed the fraud. Another from Silver Creek asking for advice on starting a recall vote. It wasn't just our neighborhood waking up. It was a movement. The final court date arrived in early August. Francine pled no contest to 7 charges. Her nephew took a deal in exchange for testimony. She was sentenced to 2 years of house arrest, 5 years of probation, and a permanent ban from holding any fiduciary position in any housing association or nonprofit. After the hearing, I passed her in the hallway. She looked smaller, somehow, not physically, but in presence. Her eyes never met mine. She didn't say anything. Neither did I. Some things don't need words. Back home, the lake was calm. The dock creaked under my boots as I walked to the edge. My boat sat where it belonged, bobbing gently with the current. Glenn pulled up in his truck and rolled down the window. "Board meeting tonight," he said. "We're voting on a new maintenance contract. You coming?" "Wouldn't miss it," he nodded. "We're ordering pizza this time. None of that carrot hummus garbage." We both laughed. As he drove off, I stood a moment longer, letting the breeze carry the damp scent of cedar and lake water. We'd done more than stop a fraud. We'd reclaimed our right to live without fear of arbitrary rules, fake fines, or power-hungry clipboard warriors. The HOA still existed. But now it worked for us, not the other way around, and if anyone ever tried to pull another stunt, well, we knew exactly how to fight back.